They organized over 300 speakers to come here and to inspire you, to empower you, and to educate you to be more and to do more. And this is what the MISC Global Forum is all about. So I'm glad you're enjoying the show so far. We had a lot of speakers. We had, of course, Bill Gates in the house, which was incredible, amongst many other incredible speakers. We have another great panel discussion coming up. We've been talking about change. There is so much change happening in everywhere, whether it's in our lives, whether it's in technology, now with the transformation, digital transformation of AI. The change in education and how we learn. Do we need to physically go to schools anymore to learn? No, we don't. We can be learning specifically from the comfort of our own homes, especially now with the power of internet and the power of AI. The change in our workplaces is also happening. So this is what this next session is all about under the education pillar. We're going to be talking about the beyond the 9 to 5. Are we strictly going to have a job that's within the 9 to 5? No, we don't have to. So this is what this next session is all about. It's going to be exploring beyond the 9 to 5. So it is with my absolute pleasure now to invite our incredible panelist to the stage. I'm first going to invite our moderator. We had him here yesterday, and he's certainly a fireball. He's a serial entrepreneur. I want to please put your hands together for Famalusi, known as Fab, also fabulous. Hey, Fab. Nice to have you back.
Hey, Shireen. Thank you so much for that fabulous introduction.
Thank you.
All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this session where we'll be talking about leadership in 2024 and beyond. Now, leadership in 2024 goes far beyond the traditional corner offices and the formal trappings of authority. Now, with rapid technological advancements, shifting work paradigms, and evolving employee expectations, the rules are fundamentally changed. Today's leaders must embrace modern management practices that prioritize adaptability, emotional intelligence, and exceptional communication skills to empower and uplift their teams. But what does this new era of leadership truly look like, and how does it resonate in practice? What strategies can emerging leaders adopt to thrive in this dynamic environment? Those are some questions my amazing panel will answer tonight. And I'm eager for you to meet the panelists, so let's go. She is an international best-selling author, empathy advocate, and award-winning founder of Empathy Everywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, Mimi Nicklin. All right, you're very welcome, Mimi. Next up, I'd like to invite the founder of Investors Mind Angel Investment Network and the partner at Saudi Arabia's leading startup studios, BIM Ventures. Please make welcome Ahmed Mirghani. Awesome. As he makes his way up, I'd like to invite this gentleman who is an adjunct professor at Wake Forest University School of Medicine and serves as executive advisor at Center for Creative Leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, David Altman. And last, but truly not the least, is a gentleman who trains CEOs and industry leaders to speak with confidence, clarity, and credibility. He is the founder of Speak Like a CEO. Please make welcome to the stage, Yasir Khan. All right. You're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
My amazing panel. So let's dive right in, shall we? Ahmed.
Yes.
Good thing you're sitting right next to me. You come to us from, two angles. you're a rather young leader yourself with 3 companies, but you also work with startups providing investment. So the first thing I'd like to know is, how easy was it to assume leadership, the leadership role? Did it come naturally to you from a young age, or are there some strategies that you may want to intimate us with that allow you to remain confident in yourself and also inspire confidence in others?
Sure. First of all, good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me in this panel. I don't think leadership is something that you can assume for a while. I think it's a way of style. So ever since I was a kid, I've wanted to be in leadership position, but I never knew what I want to be. So I did put a goal to be in a leadership position, and then it was a continuous process that since childhood days, I've been always trying new stuff that helps me to become a leader one day. And then throughout this process of becoming a leader, I've learned so much, and I'm still learning every day. So to answer the question, I would say that this is a goal since I was a kid, but I had to work hard for it, and I still have to work hard. And the tougher part is to maintain leadership. I mean, when you're in a leadership position, the challenge is to maintain the position. It's not becoming in a leadership role.
Well, that's amazing. David, I'd like to come to you next. You've worked to develop leaders for many years now, right? So first, tell us, what does it mean, even, to develop leaders? What are the challenges you're helping them to overcome?
So leaders are made, not born. And we've asked thousands of leaders 2 basic questions to understand how to respond to you. One, what were the experiences that you had that made you the leader that you are today? Ask the audience to think about that. And then second, what lessons did you learn from those experiences? And the responses that we got came in 3 buckets. About 10% of the time, people said, I read a great book, I saw a great speaker, I took a great course, and that really shaped who I am as a leader. The second category was around social learning. I observed other people lead, for good or bad, and I modeled how I show up in that way. And third, the school of hard knocks. I learned from hardship, from failure, from driving a culture change, from being asked to do something that I didn't know how to do. And so experience-driven leadership is really key. So I would encourage everybody to identify experiences that they've had that have made them the leader that they are today, and then develop a list of experiences that you and people that you trust think that you need to have to become a better leader, and pursue them vigorously. And I'll end with a quote from a CEO of a multinational corporation who was wildly successful. And you know what he said? He said, I never stopped trying to be qualified for the job. And that, I think, is the essence of leader development. Keep trying to be qualified for the job. Keep growing. We human beings, we love to grow, learn, and develop.
Keep trying, keep growing as a leader. That's amazing. I'd like to just jump very quickly to Yasser. So is now beyond being, but then showing up as a leader requires that you communicate effectively. So Yasser, your company is called Speak Like a CEO, and I hope I am speaking like a CEO. So tell us, how does a CEO speak? Isn't it all like MBA jargon and a boss attitude?
And speak like David, that's the short answer. But if you want to speak like a CEO, there are 3 main things, and you mentioned them right at the start: confidence, clarity, and credibility. But what are those things? We hear those terms a lot. If you think about the job of a CEO, it's to set a vision, stick to the vision, get people to follow the vision. So when you're confident, that means, do you believe in what you are saying? More importantly, do people believe the way you say it? So you have to speak with conviction. Number 2, clarity. Do you speak in a way where the vision is clear and easy to understand? So when you mentioned the jargon, it doesn't make it easier to understand. Yes, we might feel, hey, I'm going to use these complicated words and feel smart, but Everyone nods their head, they pretend to know, and no one actually knows what you're talking about. So be clear. And number 3 is credibility, meaning, do I trust you as a human being? Do I trust that you will deliver on what you're talking about? Now, we've all been through some sort of training, and we've all seen public speakers who will read from a script or read from notes, and they can be the most experienced people in the world, but what happens when they read from the notes? All credibility goes out the window because we don't know that's really who they are, because they're putting on a mask. So are you credible? Now, the person that I learned this from, you might have heard him speak yesterday. I didn't know of him till 3 years ago, His Excellency Abdullah Al-Swaha. A client of mine told me, hey, I want to speak like him, and I had no, thank you. I didn't know who he was 3 years ago. And a client of mine said, hey, I want to speak like him, so I Googled him. And in the first 30 seconds, immediately, wow, this person knows how to speak. And when I dissected it, I found 3 things: confidence, clarity, and credibility. So that's how you speak like a CEO.
Ooh. Oh, you want to clap? Come on, you can. It's okay.
Hey, don't be shy. I can take some compliments. It's okay.
All right then, Mimi. You've been in the advertising industry for a bit, and we know that that's quite a notoriously cutthroat industry. But in your work today, you talk about empathy as being the most important trait for leadership. Some may contest that. But can you explain what you mean? And how can young leaders go about developing this trait?
You're right that some people will contest that, but that's because they don't really know what it is. So empathy is a skill set. Many people don't know this. You may have come here thinking that it's about being nice or soft or sympathy, perhaps. But what I'm teaching with the world is definitely not to be nice. Please be nice. It's good to be nice. But empathy is a skill set. It's built into your prefrontal cortex. You were born with this ability to understand others. And what I always say to people is, how are you ever going to lead someone if you don't first understand them? So the reason that I travel the world doing this work is to try and close the gaps between predominantly the top, the middle, and the bottom, because for the first time in history, we have 4 generations in our workforce. Now, there's a big gap between 70 and 17. Most people don't speak the same language, let alone tweet the same language. So empathy is a skill set. It is critical to reconnect our workplaces and our world. Organizations that have it right get 23% higher profits. So this is a hard skill set, Fab. Hard to find, hard to master, and hard to maintain. But when you get it right, you get hard business results. So if I was going to give you one tip to really bring this to life in your work, I would start with listening, which is what I spend most of my time working on, is how to really encourage people to listen. You may think you are listening, but really ask yourself this one question. Am I listening to reply, or am I listening to understand? And once you get that right, you entirely shift your relationships, including in leadership.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
That's beautiful, actually. Are you listening? So it even starts with listening. And Mimi, we hear you loud and clear.
Thank you.
All right. So David, we hear Mimi, right? On the role that empathy plays. But I think many of us still have an image in our heads of who a typical CEO is or should look like. But that's changing today, isn't it? And secondly, what are the new skills or characteristics that you'd say are important for a young person if they want to be in the pipeline, say, for business leadership?
So the easy answer I could give would be, you need to know machine learning, artificial intelligence, digital fluency. You need to know about change. But that's true and necessary but not sufficient. So just on empathy for a moment, we did a study a couple years ago with 7,000 people in 38 countries on empathy. And what we found, and we measured empathy behavior, what we found is dose response. The more empathy behaviors that bosses show, their subordinates rate them as a more effective leader. It goes up, splits the X and Y axis. And then we asked bosses about derailment risk. What's the likelihood that these leaders are going to derail, are going to fail? Inversely related. More empathy, less derailment. So just to support that across the country. But beyond that, I know the smartest person in this room. You know who it is? I see a couple hands go up. It's the room. It's the room. And if you ever think that you're the smartest person in the room, find another room. So the reason I share that is the skills that are needed are people skills. It's how you unleash the collective capabilities of other people with whom you work. So some of the skills, some of the technical skills are going to change. If we talked about AI 2.5 years ago, we'd be talking about appreciative inquiry. Because it was just 2 years ago in this month that ChatGPT came out with their first version of AI. So yes, we need to have subject matter expertise and to deal with trends, but at the end of the day, leadership is about people. And so you've got to be expert in people development and unleashing and helping people flourish.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So I'd like to come to you, Ahmed. You fund young business leaders, right? And it's often said that when someone invests in a business, they're not just investing in an idea, but in the person, as the person with the idea. So what are those traits? What are those skills that you look for in the young leaders that you fund at BIM?
Okay. So I think everything that we are looking for in young entrepreneurs and people that we want to work with or invest in is basically a reflection of what we have in the DNA of BIM. So I'll start with an example within BIM itself. So in BIM, we hire for number one, attitude. So that's the first criteria for anyone who wants to work with us. And then number two, it's grit. So that means that you are consistently having a great and a good attitude. And then number three is a technical know-how. I could teach you anything, but I cannot raise you. I cannot teach you good principles if you don't have them from home. Because definitely your parents tried before me, and if you don't listen to them, you're not going to listen to me. So, so when we start looking for, or when we start looking at any investment opportunity, the first thing we look at is the attitude of the founders, and then the hunger that they have, the desire to success, and then the adaptability that they have, because entrepreneurship is all about being adaptable and able to maneuver your way and have the right business model all the time. And then number four, and it's one of the most important stuff, they don't have ego, right? So I don't want to do or I don't want to force my opinion, or I don't want you to force your opinion. I want to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. So these are some of the characteristics that we look for when we invest with anyone in BIM.
Wow. Yes. That's an amazing list. And that's such a, I love that that's already built into the DNA of your business. And yes, sir, I want us to talk a bit more about how these leaders communicate. So we know the business jargon is out, right? Now, you've trained founders, you've trained CEOs, and you've trained leaders of all types. What would you say are the top 3 most common challenges that they have in communicating, and what are the solutions to these challenges?
How much time do you have? Okay, I'm going to pick the top 3 that come to mind.
Let's go.
The first one I call the curse of knowledge. When you acquire a lot of experience, you know the nuances, you know the technicalities, and there is this urge to share all of that. Unfortunately, what happens is this creates complexity, meaning you talk at such a complicated level, you can lose people sometimes. So the solution to that would be to prioritize simplicity over complexity. Always choose the fewest possible words in the simplest language. Number 2 would be a over-reliance on logic over emotion. Meaning, we want to be matter of fact, we want to sound intelligent, we want to sound like an executive, but we don't really follow just the instructions. We need some emotional component. And I remember when I was in 6th grade in Pakistan, I was eating a bag of chips after school. And my dad came to pick me up. I got in the car, I finished the chips, I rolled down the window, and I tossed the bag out. My dad stopped the car in the middle of the highway, looked at me and said, "Pick that up." Do you think I've littered since then? No, because emotionally I felt it in that moment. I haven't because it had an emotional resonance with me. So you can give people instructions because they tell people what to do, but you also have to inspire them with emotion to actually do it. The instructions are not enough. So a lack of emotion is another challenge. And the last thing is, it's a more nuanced one. It's this need to come across a certain way. So prioritizing perfection over connection, meaning when I'm on stage, when I'm speaking, I want people to see me as a leader, see that I'm confident, and sometimes we'll put on a mask and pretend to be someone we're not. We want to be an overly polished version of ourselves. And we don't realize when we do that, we lose people because they can tell we're not really being us. We're not being who we really are. So we can fix that by just switching the order. Instead of perfection over connection, you prioritize connection over perfection. And I'm not sure if some of you saw, but we had Her Royal Highness Princess Rima speak today. And she had this perfect combination of warmth, intelligence, expertise, and when she speaks, you can feel the emotion, you can feel the intellect, and you want to follow what she says. So to summarize, what you should do is prioritize connection over perfection, simplicity over complexity, and speak in a way where people feel it, because if they feel it, they follow it.
Yeah. Yeah, sir. I like the fact that, and I'm just going to stay with you for a quick minute. I love the story you told because it sort of touches on something I was going to ask you. That's cross-generational communication, right? So sometimes it really feels like, the different generations speak completely different languages, right? Of course, communication goes both ways, but what advice would you give to a young leader specifically to help them communicate effectively with other generations? And can you suggest any resources to help them both understand and to be understood?
Well, first of all, I have an 11-year-old sister. So I face this challenge on a daily. I recently added 2 new terms to my vocabulary. One is no cap, and the other one is riz. I'm seeing some smiles here, so I'm starting to feel my age. But I know the challenge. So if I were to advise her or the younger generation, the first thing I would say is you have to be a chameleon. That means you have to adapt your communication style to the people you're speaking to in the context you're speaking. So just like you wouldn't speak to your children and your boss the same way, you would adapt your communication style. Similarly, you wouldn't speak to your friends and your boss the same way either. So can you adapt your communication style in a way that suits the older generation? So for example, in our generation, memes are very popular. We love texting all the time. We like using words that don't have the best spelling. So can you formalize that a little bit? Can you adapt your communication style? So that would be number one. Number two, I feel like speaking directly is a bit of a lost art, especially in my generation. We like to go and twist and turn as much as possible. But if you're an experienced leader here, and by the way, raise your hand if you're a leader, you're leading a team here. Okay. I'm sure you prefer someone to be as direct as possible when they speak with you. So if you can speak in a way that gets to the point right away, you cut through the fluff, you just show expertise. You show confidence, and you also show that you have thought through your questions and your thoughts. Because your level of intelligence will be determined by your quality of your questions and the quality of your thoughts. So show people that you have thought about what you're about to say. And the last thing, I saw someone do this today. Ratil, one of the speakers here, she's 13 years old. She's a content creator. I was blown away by how well she speaks. But she leads with curiosity. Now, when we're young in our career, we don't know how to add value. We don't have a lot of experience. What do? You ask questions that get people to think. When they think of something they haven't thought about before, you create new perspective. When you create new perspective, you add value. So when you lead with curiosity, when you are direct, and when you learn the skill of communication, when you learn to speak like a CEO, there is no place you can't go.
Thank you very much, Yasser. And as you spoke, I haven't seen David nod too many times in the course of this conversation, but he actually did nod a couple of times in this one. You want to jump on that real quick and talk about what your generation is doing or has done in terms of communicating with other generations?
Well, so we've done research at CCL on generational differences and similarities, and there are more similarities than differences. Okay. So there are differences in generations, but Human beings value some of the same things. They want to be heard. They want to matter. They want to belong. They want opportunity. They want to be developed. And sometimes what we call a generational difference is simply, it's not a generation, it's age. You're earlier in career, therefore you're at lower level in an organization. So let's focus on what really matters to human beings and feed that with everything that we have. And we will bridge some of the real and perceived gaps with, between generations. And there's one more thing I want to say. So what's happening in the kingdom, I haven't seen anywhere else in the world. So I want to call this out. We all want to be part of something that's bigger than ourselves. And I would say Vision 2030 is bigger than any one person. Now, the Crown Prince has come up and is an advocate for that. But by show of hands, if you live or work in the kingdom, do you feel like you are part of Vision 2030? Raise your hand. Okay, look at that. This is what people expect of leaders, young and old. Give us a vision, but not just your vision. Give us a vision that speaks to our heart and our soul that we can be a part of, that we can own part of the vision. When you get that, you bridge generational differences and you move countries, which is what's happening here.
No cap?
I told you speaks like a CEO.
All right. Ahmed, I'd like to come to you real quick. So when a business gets the investment it needs, its founder suddenly has to, lead more people and then answer to the stakeholders, which would be you and whoever you appoint to be on the board sometimes. So do you have a framework or a set of, milestones that you expect for a young leader in the first 100 days as they experience, this transition in the business?
Sure. Well, I don't have a specific framework because I think this is a very unique situation for every founder by him or herself. However, there are principles that you need to have them in place before even getting the investment, because those are the principles that the investor decided to invest on those bases. So you just need to reflect whatever principles you've promised. You have to you have to fulfill these promises. And then at the same time, you need to envision what you want the company to be like and start from the first day to put these principles in the company itself. And then, because if from the start you say that this is how the company is going to look like, and then you become rigid about it, right? And you start benchmarking to a company which was 100 years old, like GE or Pepsi or Coca-Cola, then you're just setting up the company for failure. You need to have the right principles. You have to be credible, direct, like Yasser was mentioning. And then, like what David was just saying, you need to give the people who are going to believe in the vision of the company something that they feel that they are part of. So there is no framework, at least in my opinion, because if I put a framework, and then I'll not be innovative, right, which defeats entrepreneurship.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So Mimi, sorry, you've been quiet for a little bit. I apologize.
I'm listening. I'm listening. I've mastered it.
All right, so we've never had, more individuals from different generations in the workplace like we do today. And, this can lead to conflict due to different leadership styles. So how would you train a young leader to work effectively with so many different generations? Perhaps you have 1, 2, 3 tips or tricks you may want to share with us.
Well, the first thing I'd say is that I'd echo really something you just said, David, which is that we're all more alike than we are different. And I think it's worth a pause on that, because in our lives and in our world, and yes, in our workplaces, we spend so much time worrying about what makes us different, about how I speak differently or communicate differently. I like to email and you like to Slack and someone else likes to Teams. And how they say things and how I say things. But in the end, we're in a team to be a team. So I really value what you said about shared value, but I value even more the point around the things that bring us together are actually bigger than the things that pull us apart. And I think if you start from there, you find a confidence that perhaps you didn't have, that those gaps that you feel or perceive to be big between perhaps you and your boss or the board of directors are far less than perhaps you think they are. And what I would say, Fab, is that there are many definitions of leadership, right? I mean, there's probably, I don't know how many there are, but I'm sure as many as you can Google, you'll find. But I like to make it really simple, and that's what you were saying earlier, yes, about keeping things simple, right? Is that to lead, somebody has to follow, right? That's at its simplest, right? To lead, to be a leader, someone has to be coming with you. And I believe that the people that people follow are the people that listen to them. And I want to give you an example that perhaps you can all use to try it. So I want you to think of 3 people in your lives that you consider to be a really good listener. If we were in a workshop, I'd ask you to write it down. But just in your minds, just think of 3 people, can be in life, in work, in your community, that you feel listen to you really well. And then ask yourself, is there anybody on that list that you want to work for, that you enjoy working for or spending time with? Put your hand up if there was someone on that list that you enjoy working with or you want to work for, right? And then question to yourself whether there are people on your list that you don't like or you don't want to work for. And what you will find is that the people that listen to you are fundamentally the people you like, respect, and want to work for. Because as David said, we were all born to be seen and heard. We don't do well when we're alone. We're a pro-social species. So that would be my tip. My tip would be to really consider how you feel when your leadership listens to you, and then replicate that outwards. And I think you'll find those gaps shrink really quickly.
That's beautiful, beautifully said. I know we're running out of time really quickly, but at this point, I would like for you to, if there's one thing, Yasser, and for every one of you, but I'll start with Yasser, that you want people in this room to walk away with tonight, what would it be?
I've talked about a lot of communication training and tips, but if I'm being completely honest, you can have all of the best skills to communicate, but if you don't have this one single ingredient, none of it will matter. And I learned this the hard way. I once did a presentation on public speaking anxiety. And I did a 75 slides, 17 methods to overcome your public speaking anxiety. There were 200 people there. When I finished it, someone came to me and said, Yasser, I'm speaking right after you. I'm really nervous. I'm really glad you talked about this. So I felt really good about myself. I'm pretty good. Thank you very much. I went, got my coffee, came back to see his speech. He walked onto the stage. He was visibly shaking. When he started speaking, his voice was shaking. He stumbled and he mumbled, and 2 minutes later, he put the clicker down and he walked off stage. Now, in that moment, my stomach was churning because I had just done a presentation on how to overcome your speech anxiety. So when I went to him afterwards, I said, what happened? I got nervous. Yeah, but I just did a speech on the 17 methods and the 75 slides on how to get over your fear of public speaking. And then he said something to me that I will never forget. He said, Yasser, I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember. And in that moment, I realized, what is the point of me being a good public speaker if people don't remember what I said? So you can have the best body language, the best gestures, the best vocabulary, the best polish in your speech. If no one remembers what you said, does it matter? So when you speak, when you present, when you're in front of people, try to be repeatable, meaning they listen to you, they remember what you said, and they can then tell other people about it. In order to be repeatable, you must speak in simple, plain, easy to understand language. So speak to be repeated. That's the advice I'd leave you with.
Speak to be repeated, meaning.
Oh, one thing. what I would say is that as young leaders, I know many of you are young leaders in the room, that you have huge power, particularly here, to change the world. And the data shows us that 52% of us, so half of this room, half of our world, is lonely. And loneliness is now the highest burden to our healthcare system worldwide. Not cancer, not heart disease, loneliness. 300 million of us don't have a single friend. How sad is that? But all of you, as leaders and future leaders, particularly in a country that is set to change the world, can make an impact. So my one thing to say would be find your dream and stick with it. Listen to everybody. Make everybody feel heard, and you can fill some of those gaps that our world has created. And we're relying on you guys, so we're relying on you to fill them.
And David?
All right, so your potential is unknown and unknowable. Your potential is unknown and unknowable. Believe that and treat other people in the same way, and we'll all flourish. And I'm having a PTSD story from Yasser, so I'll share that around potential. When I was like 14 or 15 years old, I was in a youth group, and we went on a little retreat, and adults were there. And one of my friends couldn't give a speech, but he'd written out a speech. And he said, you have to give it to me. You give it for me. So he gave me his speech, and I got up in front of 100 people. I knew how to read. I looked at it, and I went blank. I was talking, but I don't know what happened. I don't know what I said. It was mumbling, and I couldn't read anymore. And at that point, I was determined that I was going to overcome that. And I took public speaking in university, and I forced myself to believe that my potential was unknown and unknowable, that I could get better at it. And over the course of a number of years, I felt more comfortable, and now I didn't even remember that story till you drew it out of me. So thank you for that.
And here you are delivering just like the CEO. Ahmed?
Yes. So you made it very difficult when you said only one thing. But the one thing that comes to my mind, and I think it's the most important trait or the most important asset that you would have and will turn you into a good leader, is reputation. And the reason why I'm talking about reputation, because it's a continuous process. It's something that it's very challenging that you maintain, very easy that you can damage it. Like one incident can damage everything. So if you don't have a good reputation since childhood until you leave this world, then you cannot be a leader. I mean, you cannot lead if you don't have the right reputation. It's that simple.
Reputation is important if you want to be a leader. So I really do think that this session has indeed fully delivered on its objectives, even with our limited time. But I believe we're all leaving with some very key takeaways and actionable insights. I will not forget a few things that were said here today. Mimi did say empathy is a skill set, and it has to do with understanding people. And she asked the question, are you truly listening? And to lead, somebody has to follow. All right, Ahmed, leadership skills or leadership starts with a desire to lead, but you must work at it. And of course, we love the DNA of BIM and all that those values represent, the values of grit, great attitude, technical know-how, desire, hunger to succeed, adaptability, and zero ego. All right, I love that. David, leaders are made, they're not born. Experience leadership is key. And of course, you must commit to growing as a leader. Human beings want to be heard. Focus on what really matters to human beings to truly communicate. Yasser, speak with clarity, and you need to be believable. Prioritize simplicity in your communication and inspire with emotion. Adapt to the communication style of the other generation. So those are some things I'm taking away. Hopefully you do too. So thank you very much to our dear panelists. An applause for them. for such a transformational session. And to you, our amazing audience, you're the best. Enjoy the rest of the forum. It's still MGF 24.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time. Good to see you, Fab.